We begin our show in the Middle East, where the U.S. war with Iran has hit the 6-month mark, and there's still no clear end in sight. On February 28th, the U.S. and Israel launched attacks on Iran under their stated aims of preventing Tehran from getting a nuclear weapon and regime change. Fast forward 6 months, and both sides remain in a stalemate over what comes next. While the fighting has largely stopped, peace talks have stalled, and President Trump says the U.S. is no longer negotiating with Iran. As well as a human toll, the war has also had a significant economic cost. The critical Strait of Hormuz, which was open before the war, has been shut down, sending oil and gas prices soaring. NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley joins us from Tel Aviv. Matt, good to see you. This 6 months into this conflict, and it feels like this war has settled into one of economic attrition. Where do things stand on diplomacy right now? Is either side showing any willingness to talk?
Yeah, it's exactly like you said, Nikki. There hasn't been really anything in the way of diplomacy. And finally, just in the past week, we heard Donald Trump finally acknowledging that there has been no diplomatic track between the U.S. and Iran of late. However, there is advanced diplomacy going on between Iran and Oman. That deal would presumably open up the Strait of Hormuz, and according to reports, it's either basically been agreed to or is near to an agreement. However, the Iranians say they're not going to make a deal with Oman to open up the Strait of Hormuz unless the United States agrees to its demands. That puts the United States as a third party in this deal. Now, there are two sets of demands from the Iranians. They say the first one was that they wanted to see the U.S. get rid of all of its military presence around Iran's borders. It's a huge number of troops and bases. They also wanted the U.S. to pay reparations and unfreeze Iranian assets and end its aggression against Iran. These were all really maximalist demands. The latest set of demands are much more modest and involve the U.S. kind of withdrawing a little bit, but it's unclear exactly which set of demands the Iranians want and whether or not this deal between Iran and Oman will actually end up opening the Strait of Hormuz.
Matt, this war didn't begin over the Strait of Hormuz, but it has now become the central issue. Yesterday, Iranian and Qatari officials held talks aimed at reopening it. We also know Iran has been working with Oman on restoring normal shipping. What is the latest on all of these talks, and is the U.S. involved at all?
Yeah, it sounds as though the U.S., like I was saying, is more of a third party. According to reports from the U.S., they say that they are basically monitoring the talks between Iran and Oman. But the U.S. President, Donald Trump, has repeatedly threatened to attack Oman if it makes a deal with Iran to the exclusion of U.S. interests. So, that's also a very threatening element. Donald Trump has twice said that he would bomb Oman, which at this point, through its negotiations with Iran, has the best chance of opening up the Strait of Hormuz. So this situation looks like a pretty big stalemate, and the U.S. has no traction on what's going on. The latest we heard was that basically this deal would allow for ships to enter into the Strait of Hormuz through Iranian territory, and that they would exit through Iranian and Omani territory. So that looks like the beginnings of some kind of plan. But both sides say they're really sticking to their guns, including the U.S., which still wants to maintain its blockade.
And Matt, we have to talk about the human toll of this war. One of the deadliest attacks happened on day one of the conflict when a U.S. strike hit an Iranian elementary school, killing more than 150 people, most of them children. How do Iranians view that day? And is there any indication the Pentagon or the Trump administration will formally accept responsibility or release the results of their investigation?
Yeah, the Iranian government has certainly been using this as a cudgel against the United States on the international stage, using it as the prime example that U.S. attacks have had a disproportionate effect on civilian targets. There were 120 children who were killed in that strike on that school out of the more than 150 who were killed in total. So it is just a nightmare of an incident. Now, so far, internal U.S. intelligence assessments have shown that was the responsibility of the United States striking that school. But the United States government has not yet come out and formally admitted or taken responsibility. Now, the Iranian people and the survivors, basically the family members, mostly little girls who were killed, they want to see an international investigation into responsibility. And among the family members, they want to see individual people in the U.S. government named and held to account. This is a glaring episode, and it's one that the Iranians have continued to point out as a huge misstep by the U.S., and they've continued to say that this shows that humanitarian concerns have not been front of mind for the U.S. and Israel during this war. Nikki?
Matt, thanks so much. Let's continue this conversation with NBC News military analyst Colonel Steve Warren. Good morning, Colonel. Good to see you.
Good morning.
When this began, we were told it would last 4 to 6 weeks, and here we are 6 months later with neither the goal of regime change or the end of its nuclear program achieved. Where are we in this? Is this a stalemate?
Yeah. When I look at this in this 6-month anniversary, Nikki, I sort of think of it. I try to think of it in 3 ways. All right? I think of it as sort of past, present, and future. In the past, frankly, the U.S. military has proven dominant on the battlefield, right? Our technology outmatches and outclasses the Iranians. Our service members, our men and women in uniform, have performed admirably with bravery and valor, whether it was pilots who were shot down and later rescued, or the sailors aboard the USS Lincoln under very difficult conditions, continuing to accomplish and carry out and accomplish their mission. But as we look into the present, what we see now, as you, I think, so appropriately said, a stalemate. And I think of this stalemate really as a siege. Think back to old-fashioned warfare where one army would surround a castle and throw catapults at it for a long time. And that's what kind of brings us to the future. The timing. It takes a long time for a siege to work. Anyone who says they think they can predict when this will end is probably going to be incorrect. We don't know how long this siege warfare, this economic blockade, will result in the breaking of this stalemate.
Colonel, do you think this current situation is anything the Pentagon would have expected to be in at this point?
Well, expectations are always tough to predict when you're in them, right? I think the Pentagon understood that we have military dominance. We have massive overmatch. And we proved that, like I said, in the past, when this war was actually going on with bombs dropping and fighting happening, the U.S. military really did prove dominant. But with any sense of warfare, anytime there's a war, there also has to be a political component to that war. And that's something that the generals and admirals have a hard time predicting because the political component really belongs to the politicians in the White House or at the Pentagon.
There's been a lot of concern about the financial impact of this war on the U.S. military, as well as the level of our munitions stockpile and readiness. Do you share those concerns? How costly is the status quo for the military as this drags on?
Yeah, it's a great question. Cost. This stalemate, this siege has a high cost, and we're paying for it in a number of different ways, whether it's increased prices at the gas pump that everyday Americans are feeling, or whether it's the high cost of replenishing all of our munitions, the wear and tear on the equipment, the wear and tear on our troops, and even there's some cost to the prestige of the American experiment. We are not looking great right now. One thing I really want to point out, though, when we talk about the munitions stockpiles, people get worried. Are we safe? I am very confident that the United States of America today remains safe. We have enough interceptors to protect ourselves and our vital interests around the world. Nikki, it's back to school, so I think of it this way, right? A student is an A student and is going back to school. They have 6 classes but only brought 5 notebooks. That's kind of where we are. It's confusing. It's difficult. That A student is going to have to do some extra work, but they're still going to get A's. That's kind of where we are, in my view, with these munitions. We're not where we want to be, but we still have enough to get the job done.
All right, Colonel Warren, thanks so much. This morning, we're getting new images of the catastrophic flooding that has wiped communities off the map in the Himalayas. Here you see people running for their lives as a wall of water rushes toward them along the border between Nepal and Tibet. Rescuers are now racing against time to find survivors. Hundreds have been killed and more than 1,000 people remain missing. Officials say those numbers are only expected to rise as we're learning of dozens of Americans among the missing. NBC News international correspondent Janice Mackey-Frere joins us now with the latest. Janice, good morning.
Days after catastrophic flooding that wiped out entire communities here, hundreds have been saved, but hundreds more are still missing. And all across the disaster zone, we're seeing a true race to find survivors. Rescuers crawling through the mud to reach people, to drag them out, dropping down onto rooftops from helicopters. And in one case, they were able to reach their hand out to a boy and pull him up to safety. There are so many more families, though, who are waiting for any kind of information, good or bad. Outside a hospital in Kathmandu, we saw more posters that have been put up, people appealing for help, for any details that might be had about their loved ones. Dozens of Americans are still unaccounted for, parents, brothers, aunts, friends, people who were all drawn to a trip to the mountains for their own reasons, for hiking or for pilgrimage. And this morning, we're also seeing the emergence of a new threat. Reports that a lake that was created by all that floodwater in Tibet has burst, and that triggered panic downstream in Nepal. We were in one area where officials were so worried that the water levels of the river were rising that they were using whistles and loudspeakers and yelling at people to move back. I said to one police officer, "Is it coming?" He said, yeah, it's coming. He meant the flood. He said, "It's coming, you go." The military had to halt their ground rescue operation for a time today because of those warnings. And this is happening in an area that's still reeling after that massive wave cut miles of destruction into the landscape. Mud literally swallowing homes, schools, roads, buildings, and the weather with the rain is now adding to an already difficult search.
President Trump is in Houston today to help raise money for a Republican ally ahead of November's midterms. It's a race that's shaping up to be one of the most expensive in U.S. history. With control of the Senate hanging in the balance, it's also one of the tightest. Texas Democrat James Tallarico is taking on the state's embattled Republican Attorney General Ken Paxton. Paxton has been at the center of several scandals. He was indicted on securities fraud charges in 2015, but made a deal to avoid a trial. He narrowly escaped impeachment in 2023, and his estranged wife accused him of adultery last year when she filed for divorce. NBC's Gary Grumbach joins me now with more on this and other Washington headlines. Gary, good morning.
Hey there, Nikki. Yeah, Texas hasn't been considered a Republican battleground in more than 30 years, and that's why they're putting so many resources into this state, including hosting their midterm election convention right there. Organizers say the idea is really to gin up excitement among the Republican base. There's going to be speakers discussing every part of the Republican platform, from no tax on tips to parents' involvement in their kids' education to border security. Think of it as a multi-day Trump rally, essentially. Remarks from Republicans, food, drinks, even musical performances we're told to expect. It's going to be a very highly produced two-day event. We're told that Vice President J.D. Vance will be speaking on the first day, and then, of course, President Trump will be the highlighted speaker on the final day of the convention there, Nikki.
Gary, now let's switch gears to the escalating trade war between the U.S. and Canada. Yesterday, President Trump signed an executive order to rename Lake Ontario to Lake America. Why is he doing it, and does he have the authority to make that change?
So he's doing it because he can. He told reporters yesterday that he was terribly upset with the way that Canada was treating the United States. He said they were the country's worst trading partner, which is a very serious allegation to make when we have countries all over the world who we have interesting trade relationships with. So this is a punishment, essentially, for those trade moves. But I looked into this, Nikki, and I called a Canadian maritime lawyer who said, and some historians who said, Lake Ontario has been Lake Ontario since the 1600s. French explorers tried to change the names over the years. None of them really stuck, and nobody owns the naming rights to Lake Ontario. Not Donald Trump, not Mark Carney, not Ontario's Doug Ford. One person I spoke to in Canada said, American can call it whatever it wants. It's still Lake Ontario. Nikki?
Gary, what's the reaction been from Canadian officials and others to this unilateral executive decision?
Yeah, Mark Carney said much of the same, the Prime Minister of Canada. He said the name predates the Declaration of Independence and that it's going to be Lake Ontario for a very long time. You see his tweet right there. I happened to be with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick yesterday at an unrelated event when this signing was happening in the Oval Office, and we asked him about it, and he couldn't stop laughing. And I think that actually speaks to the seriousness of this executive order, very similar to what we saw with the Gulf of Mexico and Gulf of America change. Nikki?
Gary Grumbach, thanks so much. The fate of Lindsay Clancy is now in the hands of a jury. They deliberated for about 3.5 hours after closing arguments, with the defense making the case that the Massachusetts mother who admitted to killing her 3 young children should not be held criminally responsible because she was suffering from postpartum psychosis, while the prosecution told the jury it was calculated murder. NBC News correspondent Emily Akita has the latest.
A jury weighing whether Lindsay Clancy, who admits to killing her 3 children, should be found criminally responsible for their deaths and is guilty of murder.
Their mom is the one that's killing them. That's extreme atrocity and cruelty.
The former labor and delivery nurse seen emotional in closing arguments as the prosecution described in disturbing detail how Clancy strangled Cora, Dawson, and Callan in 2023 before attempting to kill herself.
Those kids were her protective factor. Those kids were keeping her from ending her misery. And so she had to remove the protective factor.
Prosecutors alleging her actions were deliberate, intentionally sending her husband out for errands before the killings and afterwards asking for an attorney in the hospital.
Still with a tube in her throat, she's asking, do I have a lawyer?
But Clancy's defense telling jurors she's not criminally responsible.
She was a nurse, a daughter, a wife, and a darn good mother.
The defense arguing she was in the throes of postpartum psychosis and says she heard a voice.
How does this turn into this? How? Because of the damn medicine and the lousy medical care that she got.
Detailing the more than a dozen medications she was prescribed,
Lorazepam, sertraline,
and alleged inadequate care despite her pleas for help. A case driving protests on both sides and thrusting maternal health into the spotlight.
And after a push by the defense, the jury is now considering manslaughter in addition to first and second degree murder. If Clancy is found not guilty, by the way, she doesn't just immediately go free. She would be checked into a mental health facility for further evaluation. Back to you.
Emily, thank you. It's been a summer of relentless weather from coast to coast. The latest round of severe storms hit millions with heavy rain in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. The hardest hit area was in New Jersey, where almost 6 inches of rain was dropped on the southern part of the state. And today, that soggy weather is expected to return with some flooding risks along the East Coast. In the Southwest, it's the opposite problem. While it may be losing its steam, that scorching days-long heat wave could still lead to record-high temperatures. Millions will once again be under heat alert stretching from California into Arizona. For more on what's ahead, let's get a check of your morning News Now weather. Meteorologist Angie Lassman is tracking the latest. Angie, good morning.
Hey there, good morning to you. We've got still some of these kind of scattered showers lingering across parts of the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic for now, but most of that moving out. We had quite a busy day yesterday, especially across the Northeast. Places across New Jersey picking up 5 inches of rain. So the flooding concern, of course, was there yesterday. Now it's shifted farther to the south, where we're going to watch for the potential for some stronger storms as well as that flooding. The storm risk not quite as elevated as it was yesterday, but we've still got some general thunderstorms that could bring us some gusty winds anywhere from Atlantic City to Atlanta. The good news is the hail risk is low, and so is the tornado risk. Meanwhile, we've got some of these kind of scattered showers and thunderstorms that could still generate some high rainfall rates. So we are going to be concerned once again about the localized flooding with those multiple rounds of rain expected across that region. Tomorrow, looking ahead to your Saturday, a lot of that activity, again, still focused across the southeast. But for the afternoon hours, shifts out towards the Gulf and leaves us with the potential for just some isolated, severe, stormy and gusty conditions. As we look ahead to today's flash flooding risk, Norfolk to Charleston, Columbia, Raleigh included in this, where we could see potentially some of those higher rainfall rates that I mentioned. Meanwhile, out west, a much smaller area under heat alerts as compared to days previous, but we're still going to see 31 million people across parts of the Southwest included in those heat alerts as we gear up for another day of potential record highs across places like the Rockies and triple digits in places like Tucson, Oklahoma City at 97 degrees. These numbers well above normal, even as we get into tomorrow. And then as we look ahead to early next week, finishing out our weekend kind of mild in New York City, but we'll see those temperatures ramp up into those mid to even upper 80s for folks across that region by the early part of next week. And we've got Tropical Storm Dolly formed yesterday, 40-mile-per-hour winds, so just barely hanging on to tropical storm strength, but moving quite quickly at 24 miles per hour. That, along with some other components, going to keep us not seeing this system strengthening, instead weakening as we get into tomorrow. The good news is, as it approaches the Leeward Islands and eventually Puerto Rico this weekend, we'll see some beneficial rain there, but other impacts will be minimal. Back to you.
Angie, thank you.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.